friends. Hope this finds you well. Thinking about new chapters, thinking about things I'm hoping for, and a new community, thinking about things I want to carry over from the community I was a part of for 20 years. Today, I want to think a little bit about trusting for life, and in particular, what this might mean for a new community. And first thing I want to say that is our trust in a new community will focus on Jesus because we really do think that he offers the fullness of life. Jesus himself seemed to think this. He said that the world can be a tough place. He said there'd be trouble in the world. We could be of good cheer. He said there's an actual enemy of our souls in this present age, in this world, that wants to kill, steal, and destroy, but he wants fullness of life for us. Purposely using the word trust, I think it's a good translation of the Greek. It conveys giving ourselves to Jesus, putting the full weight of our trust in him. Faith sometimes can seem pretty cognitive. It can seem like a belief in the sense of giving mental assent to something, but really like the word trust is, and we're giving our whole life to Jesus. A few thoughts on what this means for us as we read the Bible, as we practice faith. Beliefs are certainly a part of it, but what does it mean to trust Jesus? How does this affect how we view the Bible? And the first thing that we might want to say regarding the Bible is that the Bible points to Jesus. Jesus, in fact, thought he was the whole point of the Bible. He was talking to a group of religious people, and he said that they've been searching in the Bible because they think in this search they will inherit and discover life. And he said actually that all the scriptures point to him, that they testify to him, yet the religious people were refusing to come to him and experience life. So one of the central tenets, I would hope, of the new community I'd be a part of someday would be that Jesus is the center, and understanding that the Bible points to Jesus, that the point of the Bible is coming to Jesus. It's not to make us smarter, it's not to make us feel like we're better than other people, it's not to even be a moral guide. It's to point us to Jesus as the one who offers us fullness of life. Now, as we're thinking about Jesus as the center, and we're thinking about how this affects how we read and interpret the Bible, it's important to recognize that Jesus himself thought that there were parts of the Bible that were more important, that were weightier than others. One thing we would want to say about the Bible, I would think, is that it's all inspired. It's all God-breathed in some sense. But the Bible itself points to things being weightier, particularly as the Bible quotes Jesus. Jesus said that actually his words, his testimony, were weightier than John's. That Jesus unapologetically said, what I'm saying is more important, has more weight than what John was saying. At another point, Jesus said that the issues of justice and mercy are weightier than tithing. He wasn't saying tithing is unimportant, but he was saying that justice and mercy have to be considered weightier. So one thing we'd want to unapologetically say is that while the Bible is all inspired, some things simply have more weight, and we will be given more weight to the gospel accounts of Jesus' life: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. We'd want to say all the Bible is inspired, but we're giving more weight to John than we are, say, the book of Judges or the book of Joshua. We're giving more weight to Matthew than we are, say, Nahum or Habakkuk. And that's not to say Nahum and Habakkuk aren't beautiful and wonderful in their own right, but simply we're giving more weight to the Gospels. We're giving more weight to the words of Jesus, which he seemed to think was really wise. And then as we give more weight, some things are going to be more central than other things. And we'd want to confess with the church throughout history that there is a creedal center, that the center of our faith is summed up in the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, and that the Bible will, without fail and without error, point to this creedal center. That the Bible does contain all sorts of commands. In fact, in Jesus' time, there's 613 commands, but Jesus said there's really ultimately one command that has two facets, and that's to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. So loving God, loving people is at the center of how we are to live. Another way Jesus summed up the teachings in the Hebrew Scripture was in what we call the Golden Rule, and that is to treat others as we'd like to be treated, to do unto others as we'd like them to do unto us. So while all the Bible is inspired, there is going to be more weight at the center and more things that are central and around which we organize our life. And this, I think, will just help us keep calm and sane as we talk about other things. Some of the other things that come up from time to time are some of the details of the Bible. And one thing I'd want to propose is that when we move to the realm of details, if we were thinking about trust, faith as concentric circles, Jesus is the absolute center of our trust. Just the next closest circle is the things that are central within the Bible, the things attested in the creeds, loving God, loving people, the Golden Rule. But then there's an outer ring, if you will, that would include the different details within the Bible. And our trust, I want to be careful to say here, is not in the idea that the Bible is what might sometimes be called 100% accurate on all details. And first, I just want to say that that wasn't the primary concern of the authors that God was inspiring to write the Bible. And in my opinion, it makes for a little craziness when we're asking this beautiful ancient book to be held to some modern standards, and actually modern standards that it's impossible for us to live up to. A couple examples that will help, I think, illustrate what I'm thinking about talking about here. There's the genealogies of Jesus' birth. Jesus is the central figure in the Bible, so there's 4 gospel accounts of him. 2 of the gospel accounts, Matthew and Luke, include genealogies. It doesn't take a very careful reading to understand that the 2 genealogies are not the same. There is a variance in the details. You can go check it out. Read Matthew's genealogy. Read Luke's genealogy. They won't match up. The one that was very troubling to me in college, details that don't match up. There's the story of Peter denying Jesus on the night before Jesus' crucifixion. There's the saying of Jesus that Peter would deny him. In the Mark account, Jesus says that the rooster will crow twice before Matthew denies him 3 times. In the poetic King James, it's before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me thrice. It's a nice little rhyming thing there. In the other accounts, it's that Peter will deny Jesus 3 times before the rooster even crows. Here's what I want to say about that. Those details simply don't match up. We can do some gymnastics to try to make the details match up, but they don't match up, and I don't think that's the point of the story. It seems to me the point of the story is that there are going to be all sorts of temptations in this life to deny Jesus. There's going to be some really dark nights when we lose hope. There's going to be some really dark nights when it seems like the morning's not going to come and we're not going to be true to who God has made us to be. And of course, the beautiful part of that story is that Peter is eventually restored, but it's probably helpful for us to understand that a person who is a pillar of faith, upon whom Jesus said he would build his church upon Peter's confession, that this person experienced a dark night of the soul when the night was really long and when he was afraid and when it seemed like maybe the dawn was not going to come. And before the dawn came, he had done things of which he was deeply ashamed. That to me seems to be the point, not the details. And again, in that story, the hero is Jesus, and ultimately in that story we would want to come to Jesus. Now, there was a point in my life, because I'd been taught certain things about the Bible, that there would never be any contradiction, even in this area of details, that my belief about the rooster was on par with, say, my belief about the resurrection, about that God is the creator of everything in heaven and in earth. And to me, that seems like a really tenuous way to practice faith. I don't want my thoughts about the details regarding the rooster to be on par with my thoughts, my beliefs about the resurrection. So the details are not as central as things that are in the center. And perhaps one last thought on the details is that it'd be a mistake to read that story and say because the details don't match up, this story never happened. There's events in our recent history in which people have different perspectives on the details, perhaps the most famous being the Kennedy assassination. There will be people who will say there was a shooter on the grassy knoll. There will be others who would say Oswald acted alone. It would be a grave mistake, I would think, for a historian 2,000 years removed, 2,000 years in the future, to say that the details don't match. So John Kennedy was never shot. John Kennedy may not even have existed. So all that to say that even according to our modern standards, around very significant historical events, there's differences on details. But when it comes to practicing trust in Jesus, we want Jesus to be the center. Then the next ring would be the things of the creeds, loving God, loving people, following the golden rule. The details are on an outer ring, and it's fun to discuss them from time to time, but we're not centering our trust there. Related to details, also on what I'd want to call an outer ring, would be opinions, and these would be our thoughts about important teachings, doctrines that are contained in the creed, that are contained within the Bible. For example, that God is the creator of heaven and earth is something that all followers of Jesus through the centuries have affirmed. Now, you may or may not be aware there's all sorts of different opinions on the length of time creation took, on how old the earth is, how old the universe is, how God created life. There's differing opinions. There's what's called young earth creationism. There's something called theistic evolution. There's another thing called intelligent design. People have different opinions. Another part of the creed is that Christ will return, and all Orthodox followers of Jesus through the centuries have affirmed that Christ will return. You may or may not know there's all sorts of different theories on how exactly that will happen. There's what's called premillennialism, this idea that Christ will come before the eternal kingdom is established. There was what's called postmillennialism, an idea that gradually things will improve, and through the church, the kingdom of God will come in fullness here on earth as in heaven. There's what's called amillennialism, which would read the millennial passages in the book of Revelation as figurative, and that the kingdom will come. Amillennials would be less sure about timing type things and order. There's I guess what I describe myself as panmillennialism, which is just a deep faith that everything's going to pan out and be good in the end. There's different opinions. There's differences of opinions on whether or not women should be pastors. To be clear, I'm for women being pastors, women speaking, women having leadership authority in the church. In fact, there's a whole cottage industry on different opinions about doctrines, about important things. There's a book called Four Views on Miraculous Gifts, a book called Four Views on Women in Leadership, Four Views on the End Times, Four Views on Hell, Four Views on Salvation. One person who's pretty good at math looked at just 17 different areas where there's like the Four View books, and determined that there was at least 5 million different combinations that would still fit within orthodoxy. 5 million different ways that different views could be combined. Now, something that I think has been profoundly unhelpful, but I have a faith that God will work for the good, has been the tendency for communities to split when they begin to differ on what I would think are outer ring matters of opinions. Since the Protestant Reformation, with this emphasis on the Bible being without error in all things, and speaking really clearly on all areas of opinion and doctrines, there's been over 30,000, by most estimates, different splits and sects within Protestantism. And so I've always loved this cartoon. It's of a teacher teaching a children's class, a membership class, going through all the different splits throughout history where people have disagreed over the nature of communion, the Lord's Supper, disagreed over baptism, disagreed over end times. And so the teachers circled. So this is where our movement finally came along and got the Bible right. One of the students says, Jesus is so lucky to have us, which I, of course, find both quite funny and sad. And I find it funny because there's quite a bit of truth there. I find it sad because there's quite a bit of truth there. So one thing that I would be hoping for a community that I'll be a part of in the future would be an understanding that opinions are on the outer ring, and that we will learn to stay together even when our opinions differ. And that's because our trust and our hope is not in our opinions, but in the living God. In fact, the Bible would say trusting our opinions, being certain about our opinions, drawing life from our opinions is what's called idolatry. And what we are hoping for, what I'm hoping for in a community of the future, is that our differing opinions would actually be an indication to us that we're not talking about something that's in the center. We're not talking about Jesus as the perfect revelation of God. We're not talking about the great command to love God and love people. We're not talking about the golden rule, and that our differing opinions would actually hold us together, and that the tension we feel from these differing opinions would point us to Jesus, would point us to the center, that our different opinions in the community of faith could actually pull us to Jesus, the center. So I'd love to have some dialogue on this. I wonder what your feelings are on this. What are your thoughts on this? What are your questions? What still needs to be filled in? I'd love to hear from you. Again, can interact some over the internet, online, but above all, would love to hear from you personally via email. I don't mind talking on the phone. Above all, like seeing people in person. So our backyard is open. We still got the fire pit out. We can open a bottle of wine, can make decaf coffee, can serve water, can serve nothing, can just chat, but would love to hang out. So I'm dreaming of a community where our trust, our faith is focused on Jesus, because we really think that he does offer the fullness of life. I'm dreaming of a community where we can hang together in differences, centered on Jesus, with a deep trust that Jesus is good, that Jesus is leading us, that Jesus isn't anxious by our differences of opinions. I'm dreaming of that community and would love to dream with you. So may grace and peace be with you.